Hi everyone, Jackie here. I know I'm doing it again, but since the last video I made where I was saying, well, most of you know me anyway, so why am I introducing myself? Well, since then, there have been some people that I don't know personally who've donated, probably because of a bunch of you who do know me who shared this, so thank you to the new donors, and thank you for the older donors for sharing. The campaign, the Spirit Walk for the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal is ongoing till Friday, so if you can share in your networks, if you haven't already, that would be great. Surpass the new goal of 2,500, and right now I think it's sitting at 2,700 and something, so might just get to 3,000. It's pretty exciting. It's about almost twice as much as I usually manage to raise for the Spirit Walk every year. So I'm really stoked that in spite of harder economic times right now that you've all been so generous. And the Native Women's Shelter is doing really phenomenal work. So I didn't make a video yesterday. I was walking with my son, and there's a certain routine, and you know me, my son's on the spectrum, and I am too, and anyway, there's certain routines that I can't really shake up, but it also means that I didn't get to go to the demonstration yesterday that I think it was the Native Women's Shelter who was organizing it, protest against how, against systemic racism toward Indigenous people, but how it's manifested in the recent death of Joyce Echaquan at the Joliet Hospital. And I was with them in spirit, and I was thinking about it, and I do wind up missing a lot of these kind of actions as a single parent of a disabled person. A lot of my time winds up being devoted to my parental responsibilities, so I do miss out on a lot of things, but I get to do this, and I get to do some stuff at work around awareness raising and teaching, which I hope will have longer term impacts towards long-term sustainable change with regards to our really messed up system right now. But I was really happy to see pictures online of the event yesterday. I hear there were thousands of people, and it's just really amazing. In the past, decade or so, there's so much more support for Indigenous rights among the non-Indigenous population than there was before, and it's great. Okay, I'm glad that more people are learning, are taking the time to inform themselves, and who are following the lead of Indigenous activists and land defenders, and supporting in that way. One thing I notice is that I hear, again, as part of my work as a college teacher, so I teach younger people, but I also try to help teach a lot of my colleagues in matters of Indigenous education, and because as Jean Becker, who's a Anishinaabe scholar from, I don't remember which university in Ontario, could have been Ryerson. She gave a talk at Concordia a couple years ago, and something that she said is something that I knew, but I had never really thought about it before. But you can get a PhD in this country and not know anything about Indigenous people. And when you think about it, that's just beyond problematic. That shouldn't be. So you shouldn't be able to get out of any kind of schooling as a non-Indigenous person here and not know these cultures and histories. And so a lot of my colleagues who are very well-intentioned just don't know some of the basics, proper terminology to use, the difference between First Nations and First Peoples, and Indigenous and how the Indian Act really works, and just a lot of this stuff. So there are topics that have gained a lot of visibility, like residential schools and increasingly the 60s scoop, but there's so much more to know, and I've ranted about this in these videos before. And in my discussion with colleagues sometimes, or just when I hear people talk in general, non-Indigenous people talk, I hear people who are increasingly, oh yeah, there's so much unfairness and there's been so much neglect, and oh my God, some communities don't have clean drinking water, and the impacts of residential schools and 60 scoop, and people are growing in their awareness and want to take action, but there's always this sticking point, and that's when it comes to the land and the term decolonization or Indigenous sovereignty. And it's a little bit how, like, so many colonial governments have said they were on board with the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights, but that sticking point is always the land. Even Legault recently, well, it's all fine and good, but we can't give Indigenous people veto power over development projects. And so that sticking point of actually concretely righting a wrong and going beyond symbolism, going beyond fancy words of reconciliation, that winds up being the sticking point. And it's so aggravating because honestly, as I've said before, and as again, I get all this from listening to Indigenous activists and workers and scholars and artists. It's kind of like Wayne Robinson, who works at Resilience Montreal, came to Vanier last year to be on a panel that we organized, and he gave the example, he used me in this example, which is great. He says, if I grab Jackie and punched him and throw him to the ground, and then I go, oh, Jackie, I want to reconcile with you, I'm really sorry that I did that, but then he keeps punching me. Well, that's not helpful, and it doesn't right or wrong. It's just words. So land back, you see this hashtag sometimes, and it touches on all these other things. When you think about violence towards Indigenous women and girls, and missing and murdered Indigenous women, and discrimination against Two-Spirit people, and lack of drinking water in some communities, and all these issues, they're all connected ultimately to the fact that Indigenous peoples had their sovereignty and self-governance taken away from them, and that includes access to lands and to what they needed to support themselves. So I know I've ranted about that before, that sticking point, and I know that for a lot of people there's this fear. They hear the words decolonization and they think that it means that all the settlers are going to have to leave. And I've also mentioned that for the most part, I have rarely heard any Indigenous people say that, but I some people, sometimes they'll say, Jackie, you rant, but what's the solution? And it's like, you know what? It's not up to me to suggest solutions. I'm throwing my lot in with Indigenous peoples and how they would see the ultimate solutions to this. I suspect, not all Indigenous people agree with each other, right? So there are people who kind of want to appropriate the Canadian, European-based governance system with elections and all that, and they're kind of making their way into that system and trying to appropriate it. And there's that's legit. The people that I tend to follow and support are the ones who want to maintain their local traditional governance systems, which are different from nation to nation. And let's imagine, what could it look like if we dismantled this colonial political governance system, which, as much as some people think, oh, this is the fairest system in the world, really it's not. We're not as free as they raise us to think we are. There's a lot of hypocrisy. There's this electoral system where you elect somebody to, make decisions for you, but how much agency do we have over all those decisions that are made throughout a mandate of a government? Unless we take the initiative to write to our MPs, and they're free to ignore us. And we all know they're not really working in the interest of the people. They say that, but we know who wins out in the end. It's very wealthy corporate owners. So how does that system make sense? It doesn't really. It's not helpful. So I really strongly believe that if Indigenous peoples were able to kind of have sovereignty for their own nations, but where they had a full say on what happened on their territories, which is pretty much all the land here, that I think that would be good for everyone because of the ethics of reciprocity and egalitarianism that would be present. And so personally, I would support this with all my heart. I would, in whatever capacity that people who would take on these leadership roles would see fit. I'm throwing my lot in with these traditional systems. I've read before in terms of anti-racism by white people. I don't remember the exact phrase, but something about my liberation being bound up in yours. And that's, to me, none of us can, again, it sounds cliche, but none of us can be free until we all are. And I will never feel free until all peoples have access to the material well-being that they need to flourish. And that is not the case right now. So, yeah. I'm going to stop there for today. And I know a lot of this is stuff I've said in other videos. Everything's connected. Everything comes back. And yeah, it's all connected with what's going on, because when people people have been disempowered and are put into these positions, then you wind up with all this violence, because people are they're not inherently vulnerable. People are rendered vulnerable in an oppressive system. So that's something to think about. And again, just to kind of conclude, what I'm saying is that it's not up to me to come up with solutions. I'm here to raise awareness, and I'm here to encourage fellow settlers to listen to Indigenous voices, all of them, not just the ones who are in the band council system and that's been put there by a colonial government. You understand what I'm saying? Listen to the land defenders, listen to the water defenders, the elders, listen to the people who are trying to maintain and assert the rights of traditional councils, which are the ways of this land. So that's it. Happy Sunday. I will see you tomorrow.